tease interconnectivity and everything, but I just wanted to share this breadcrumb, which I think is... Now, this guy I've been following for years. I believe he may be American, maybe not, but he's been obviously approved by the CCP, or he wouldn't be getting this video out. And why doesn't Apple make iPhones in the USA? Because China will not allow it.
We need to start being honest with ourselves. Apple is a multi-trillion-dollar corporation. And every single product for every single customer is dependent on China. 30 years ago, Shenzhen did not know anything about how to mass produce electronics. China didn't know anything about how to mass produce electronics.
I'm just going to pause that there and say China is a product of Apple. And if the new guy's book that's just out on Apple, I was watching his interview, Apple funded all of this development basically in Shenzhen. They spent an equivalent amount of money 2 times the Marshall Plan. 2x. The Marshall Plan, for all you Gen Zers or whoever, that was the funding the U.S. did to rebuild Europe, Western Europe, after World War II. Herculean lift, okay? Billions in present dollars, right? China spent twice that. Training, funding, providing technology, none of which they own, by the way, to China, going 3 and 4 levels deep on their electronic supply chain, and again, building out this infrastructure in Shenzhen, which has been used by all these other companies. And for this, they get the iPhone delivered to them at a cost of $99 or so. Now, here's the thing, and I don't know if he just mentioned it or not, but I'm going to play this again. Right now, Trump is putting tariffs and has loosened the tariffs on Apple, but the thing is, Apple is owned by the CCP and China. And as this guy says, if Apple decides, if the CCP decides Apple isn't going to be doing business in China anymore, they're finished. They have nothing. Because their entire company, and, you know, the present CEO of Apple is a supply chain guy, and he was known as Attila the Hun of the supply chain. And he maniacally installed this whole base. And by the way, this was all legal. There was no laws, U.S. laws against this, but the amount of skill transfer and technology transfer and know-how transfer and factory and supply chain and all of this could have been built in the United States. However, Apple chose, under Tim Cook, to build it in China. And I just want to make a point here. Everybody says, oh, manufacturing. Well, you know, manufacturing creates wealth. Lack of manufacturing creates poverty. This little village, Shenzhen, across from Hong Kong, had a population of 30,000 people, and they were a fishing village. Now they produce 90% of the world's electronics, and they have a population of 30 million. So let me just start this video back up. By the way, this is Inside China Business. I've been listening to this channel for a long time. This guy's very good. Appears to be neutral sometime, but, you know, obviously if he's coming out of mainland, he is CCC approved. So let's listen to the rest of what he has to say here.
Now they're the only ones who know how. And if it took Bloomberg and the Wall Street Journal only a couple of days to figure out that Apple's got really big problems here, then I'm sure the China government already knows. And so does Apple. Thanks for listening. Be good.
Okay, so I don't think many people realize that, well, I think all you have to do is look at Apple. They have no manufacturing facilities inside the United States. And it's all in China. The supply chain's all in China. From the mines to the finishing, to the labor, to the factories, to the engineering, all of that know-how, 2x the Marshall Plan investment made by Apple, who does not own any of this infrastructure. The CCP owns it. Right now, there are limited tariffs by Trump over Apple and certainly the tariff trade with China, but the point being, we need a domestic cell phone manufacturing capability. It's essential. I mean, yeah, you know, it's got to happen. It's got to happen soon. And we know how much we're going to have to spend. What China spent, 2 times the Marshall Plan. So we have to get going on that. And I think Tesla obviously is the company to bring this business to the United States. And I'm going to go into that in the next section. Okay, just to put this in reference, we're talking about the Marshall Plan here. One interesting statistic of this guy that wrote this new book, he said, not sure if that was the source, but anyway, Apple spent, yes, it was the source. Apple spent in 1980s, $1990, whatever it was, in China to build out the manufacturing capability and the supply chain capability to make Apple, iPhones, iPads, so forth. And they've gone 3 or 4 layers deep on this. In other words, you know, the chip, the frame the chip mounts in, the screws that hold the frame the chip mounts in, the foundry that makes the steel that makes the screws that hold the chip in. And by the way, Tesla uses this same method of sourcing, where they train all their supply chain entities to their standards. Anyway, so this guy said, that wrote this new book, 2 times the Marshall Plan, okay, is what Apple spent in China. And they own none of this, by the way. This is owned by the CCP. You know, the communist owns the means of production. $136.5 billion is what the Marshall Plan cost in today's dollars. Now, if you multiply that by 2, which is the multiple Apple you use to gauge Apple's investment in China, in today's dollars, China invested to build out their manufacturing capability in China, which they do not own, by the way, and which is now subject to tariffs and every other thing. And of course, according to this last guy, Business Insider, China Business Insider, China can stop this production at any time they like and turn this production capability over to the Huawei or Oppo or any of the other great Chinese phone makers. Anyway, this is how much China spent, okay, in today's dollars. And we could assume this is what it would cost to replicate that in China, okay? So this might be higher in the United States, or with the advances in AI and technology and robotics and so forth, might be the same or a little bit lower. But anyway, to give you a ballpark figure of what it's going to cost to bring cell phone manufacturing on the equivalent level as China. Of course, we have a different capitalist system and so forth and different investment metrics. $273 billion. Okay? $273 billion is what it's going to take to pull this off in America. So, thanks a lot, Apple. Would have been great if you would have just done all this here. Anyway, now we're faced with the Chinese having a stranglehold on all this manufacturing and supply chain capability, which is untenable. And I think that President Trump is, with the rare earth minerals project in Ukraine and some other things, his friendship with Trump, I think they have a plan for a Tesla phone. We're going to get into that in a minute. Okay, this is just a recent position statement from Trump on tariffs and Apple and cell phones in general. He refers to Tim here. Tim is Tim Cook, president of CEO of Apple. And I just want to mention, the $500 million investment in the U.S. that Apple is talking about to Trump includes a stock buyback. So, this is, I believe Tim Cook is going to drag his feet on this as long and as hard as he can. China is his baby. He does not want to give it up. And it's probably impossible to give it up. It would threaten the existence of Apple, and I don't know if he can go into manufacturing in the United States, because after all, if they do, then what's to stop the Chinese from stopping their manufacturing in China? And I'm sure they've mentioned this to Apple. Let's just hear this clip. I'm going to comment over it a little bit.
Have that appropriately done by the end of June. So if they make that product. Now, again, when they build their plant here, there's no tariff.
Talking about Apple.
They're going to be building plants here. But I had an understanding with him that he wouldn't be doing this. He said he's going to India to build plants. I said, that's okay to go to India, but you're not going to sell into here without tariffs. And that's the way it is. Yeah.
Why would you recommend America?
I'm just going to comment on that. When he goes to India, that's the last point of assembly. And that, for tariff purposes, is considered to be the origin of the product. But in fact, Foxconn, who is China's main contractor for making these things, all their products, has moved a lot of machinery, of their machinery, not Apple's machinery, to India. And they are setting up facilities in India, large capacity. However, these are not manufacturing facilities per se. They're the last point of contact for the product. They may have the jigs there for assembling the phones, or bending the stainless steel strip that goes on the outside of the phone or something like that and putting it on. They're going to do that and then stamp a Made in India sticker on it, and then hopefully get around tariffs that way. And this is a common tariff dodge, and I'm sure Letnick and Trump are aware of this, but you can see here that Trump is already putting the kibosh on this. So let's just hear what he has to say about Apple building manufacturing plants in the United States. And by the way, everything that he's saying here will also apply to Tesla if they wanted to go into this business. So let's just continue this.
What makes you confident, sir, that Apple can build in the United States at a price that American consumers?
Oh, they can. No, they can. And a lot of it's so computerized now. These plants are amazing if you look at them, but they can do that. And actually, as you know, Apple's coming in with $500 billion. So are the chip companies. We have all of the chip companies coming in. The biggest, $500 billion, $200 billion, $250 billion they're spending. But we're talking about the iPhone now, and the iPhone, if they're going to sell it in America, I want it to be built in the United States. We have numerous other deals that are ready to be signed. We've signed a deal with China. We have some really amazing deals, but the European Union, I mean, the sole purpose was really to...
Okay, that's it for this. That's a replay, but that's Trump's position. He is not allowing anything. I mean, he's hardcore. He wants Apple to build here. I don't know. As I said, will China even allow Apple to make phones here? Will they? At all? I think no one's considering this question. And I think that's the main reason that Tesla has a chance to really swoop in on this market sector. Okay, and just to close this out. Now this is from Grok. And Grok is, strict denial of anything going on with the cell phone. Well, they say these are rumors, blah, blah, blah. However, they tease interconnectivity and everything, but I just wanted to share this breadcrumb, which I think is very telling to close this out. Starlink direct to cell. And I'm reading this from a Grok response, so take that for what it's worth. Through SpaceX, another Musk company, Starlink is developing direct-to-cell technology, enabling texting, calling, and browsing on existing LTE phones without a cellular network. So this implies Tesla would own the network and not use existing cellular networks, using satellites. Okay? Enable texting, calling, and browsing on existing phones without a cellular network using satellites. Now, get this. This service is available in some regions via partners like T-Mobile, Optimus, Tesla, and others starting in 2025. Okay? That's a rollout. This is a test case on the network. It's not a Tesla-branded phone plan, but could integrate with Tesla's ecosystem in the future. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink, say no more, say no more.